I think, because let me tell you something. Let me share something right now that you've never heard on this show before. You hear everyone talking about cosmic impact hypothesis. You hear people talking about sun cycles. Not a lot of people have been on here talking about pole shifts. Let me give a quick shout out to Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers. I recommend maybe you link up with him. Nobody has researched the topic of pole shifts and sun cycles as much as him. And he brought something to my attention I had never heard before. Jamie, the very first slide that you showed was of the Gothenburg excursion. So there was a partial pole flip right in the middle. See how it dates between 13,007 and 12,003? So the Younger Dryas started 12,800 years ago. And it's right in the middle of that ballpark range. We already know, it is established science that when geomagnetic pole excursions happen, it changes weather patterns on Earth as well as the ocean current. Jamie, if you want to Google, there's a space.com article titled that in 2025, some scientists are suggesting that the Earth's ocean currents may stop. Have you heard this?
No.
Okay. And nowhere in the articles do they mention anything about pole excursions. So people need to understand that we're already in the middle of a pole excursion, which is a partial pole flip, which means that things are shifting inside the Earth. It's also known that that can cause changes in ocean current. Now, most mainstream articles, let me just be fair and tell you what they'll say. They'll say that, oh, no, it's related to man-made climate change. We're changing the currents of the ocean. I don't believe that. But, yeah, hit don't allow. Don't let them take your data. Look at this. Nowhere in this article did it explain why. But here's the thing. People need to understand that the number one thing that affects weather on Earth is, of course, the sun. The second thing is ocean currents. It's the reason why England is relatively temperate.
Go back to that, Jamie.
It's the reason why England is relatively temperate is because the Gulf Stream flows up there and it keeps it relatively warm in comparison.
The way it says it here, key Atlantic current could collapse soon, impacting the entire world for centuries to come, leading climate scientists warn. So just by saying climate scientists, you're already implying at least this is the result of climate change.
Right, that's what
which further fuels this agenda that man-made climate change is the cause of all of our woes.
Yeah. And the reason why you shouldn't listen to these people is because they're leaving out the key data involving Earth's historical climate data.
Yes.
They're not including all these other details.
Right.
And so I think people need to look at pole shifts because it's very interesting in this alternative realm that you have people that are proponents of the cosmic impact hypothesis. You have Dr. Robert Schoch with the sun cycles. You have other people talking about pole shifts. I think people should consider that all the above are correct, and let me explain why. When pole shifts happen, Earth's shields are diminished. We're in the middle of a pole shift right now. The Earth's shields are diminishing, and it's been happening since the 1800s. It's been accelerating over the last few decades. This is scientific data. The North Pole is shifting at like almost 40 miles a year, when it was half that just a decade ago. And when the Earth shields diminish, we are more susceptible to cosmic impacts because less
40 miles a year?
Google it. This is real.
Wow.
It's happening.
I had no idea. I thought it was feet a year.
Now, the mainstream will say, don't worry, it's still another 1,000 years away. And I'm like, they actually can't prove that because we haven't been alive to document a pole shift. But what I'm trying to say is that we should consider the pole shift thing. Brother, ask Elon Musk his thoughts on this sometime.
Well, he actually just tweeted something about it recently.
What did he say?
He tweeted something about the magnetic poles.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. He tweeted something about
I think he actually retweeted the
core of the Earth.
What's his face? I forget his name, but you were just shouting
Ben Davidson?
Ben Davidson. I'm pretty sure he retweeted Ben Davidson.
Oh, we need to find that out if that's the case. Because here's the thing.
He tweets so much, though. It takes so long to go through his tweets. I don't know.
He does it too much. It's less effective because I'm like, I miss stuff. And I follow him closely, actually. There you go.
Yep.
Look at this.
Oh, it's Brian
crust of solid
Brian,
rock, beneath which a vast ball of molten rock, Earth's core, which generates most of our magnetic field, is 85% iron and moves independently from the surface plates, which is why the magnetic pole changes position.
I love Brian Romelli. If I'm saying his name right, we follow each other. He's a great guy. I think Elon Musk is giving a hint here because you remember how the northern lights were visible as far south as Mexico recently in the last few months?
That was from solar activity, right?
Right. But the reason why it's more visible now is because the Earth shields are diminishing. This isn't like from Bob's website. This is mainstream science. Again, Ben Davidson has taught me a lot on this, and he was actually on with Alex Jones not long ago, and he really blew Alex Jones's mind. He vetted him, and so what I'm trying to say here is that like this is not being brought into the equation of man-made climate change
Right.
at all.
Well, they
Because of
can't.
all the things we were talking about, the educators want
They
to be the
can't,
only
yeah.
ones that distribute the information, and they don't want to look at the full picture. They only want to look at this one thing for the greater good of all of us. It's better if you just get people to only focus on getting an electric
Earth
car.
is undergoing a cyclical magnetic pole shift, a geomagnetic excursion. This is an extinction event for many species every cycle, and we're going to go over the basics here for those new to the topic and exactly why it is such a scary thing for our planet. It has been well known that the magnetic field is weakening and the magnetic poles are shifting. These happen regularly on a cycle. That cycle is due again right now, and we are already seeing the exact signs. In the year 2000, NASA and geophysicists said we were down in the field by 10%, and the ESA's magnetic mission updated that number to 15% in 2010 and said that we had gone from losing 5% of our planet's field per century to 5% per decade. Let's see what that looks like visually, with the 2020 mark another 5% down, and the 2023 interpolated value when the latest acceleration occurred. The first 10% took 150 years to lose, the next 10% only 20 years. After the latest acceleration, we could be losing as much as 5% every 5 years. I plotted the most likely curve here, showing that around 2040 we will have the full flip, the excursion. And it may be a few years before or after that, but this is as accurate as it can be. The purple line you see there shows when we expect to be 50% down, in the early 2030s, when it will be at a level that makes our technological way of life unsustainable and when its impact on weather will be very extreme. Yesterday we shared the critical new chapter out of a new university textbook hitting the topic of space radiation and extinctions, and the two things it mentions are of critical importance for us over the coming years: the ozone loss due to particle-driven molecular destruction and the extra exposure to cosmic ray space radiation. Basically, climate chaos and radiation exposure. This is because the only thing standing in the way of those effects is the magnetic field of Earth, the one that is weakening in this ongoing pole shift. To compare, here is a side-by-side of the normal and excursion or pole shift magnetic field. On the left, the strong field protection in bright colors in polar configuration, but on the right, we see the poles are actually near the equator, and the brighter colors are gone, leaving us more vulnerable to that dangerous space radiation. After 2 decades of scientific disagreement, the naysayers have now disappeared. Every major study on this topic in the last several years shows that these magnetic reversals, these pole shifts, are extreme events for the environment. They take a huge toll on the biosphere, and that is usually due to the extra radiation and ozone destruction-driven climate chaos. The best such paper directly tied those extinctions to past pole shifts in history, and they offer us a warning for the future. These, by the way, are the top scientists in the field in the world's #1 geophysics journal. Now, the aurora are beautiful, no doubt, but they have been offering us a warning lately, breaking records, appearing too often, and with less than expected solar activity. They're already having measurable effects on the ozone and on the environment as a whole. There are hundreds of studies confirming the ozone destruction by solar protons, solar electrons, and cosmic rays, all of which are penetrating into the atmosphere more with the weakening field and will reach critical levels in the years ahead. This extra radiation does two main things. Its ozone destruction allows more ultraviolet light into the Earth's system, causing more heat, and the extra cosmic rays amplify the extremes of weather of all kinds: heat, cold, wind, lightning, storms, flooding, drought, basically taking Earth's weather and pushing it to the max in all directions. These things not only impact the climate, but living creatures. That extra ultraviolet light is dangerous for animals and plants, as well as the microbiota of the planet, including the plankton and chlorophyll food chain foundations in the ocean. The cosmic rays provide a similar amplification of particle radiation on this same life as well. Everything from cancer to cellular dysfunction to DNA mutations. Furthermore, The magnetic field of Earth usually funnels much of this particle radiation to the polar region, where virtually nobody lives and far less life exists. But in the excursion scenario, those polar cusps are found at lower latitudes, and an extra directing of that energy and radiation will hit the life-housing regions of the Earth, while at the same time, the field is also less able to block the pushing of Van Allen belt electrons downward into the atmosphere during solar storm impact. It's a double whammy for the latitudes where most of the life on Earth is found. So why do these scientists keep finding extinction and major biosphere stress related to the magnetic pole shifts? It's because of those climate impacts and both the extra ultraviolet and particle radiation. Taking extra radiation when your environment shifts dramatically is a serious challenge for most life. But it gets worse. It's not just birds that use the magnetic field for navigation, but many other creatures as well, including several marine species like dolphins, whales, sharks, turtles, and various fish. And it's not just for migration, but foraging and finding reproductive zones. Similar impacts are found for insects in terms of hibernation, egg success, and activity in the day versus night. And even plants use Earth's field. It's critical for germination, seed health, growth, and flowering. So let's make that climate chaos, extra radiation, and navigational struggles, not to mention the problems with the plants. This is why the scientists are able to so clearly see that these cyclical magnetic pole shifts are major problems for life on Earth. As humans deal with these challenges, both directly and indirectly through their impact on the food chain, we have also made ourselves largely dependent on electricity as a society. When the magnetic field gets weak enough, the sun is going to turn off the lights, destroy every power grid, and when that happens, there's no more heat, no more water treatment or distribution, no refrigeration or food transport, no gas, no ATMs, no phones or internet, no 911, no critical infrastructure at all. This is a growing issue, and it's on Earth's bingo card for the years ahead. In just the last year, things have taken an even more alarming turn. The March 2023 magnetic anomaly has accelerated this process even faster. We're on the way down much quicker now, which is what we're seeing with the accelerated downward curve in this chart. It is the reason why a minor solar event in April of 2023 caused an unprecedented and new kind of plasma penetration solar storm effect. It is the reason why 2023 broke the low-latitude auroral record, and it is the reason why we got impossibly low-latitude auroras this past weekend from solar activity that was significant, but it wasn't extreme. In the past, these kinds of aurora only happened with solar activity that was 20 to 50 times stronger than what we got. It happened this week because our planet is losing its protection and becoming more vulnerable.
According to Casey, the Earth is in for a catastrophe that will reshape continents and rewrite borders around the world. In 1936, Edgar Casey predicted that the world would undergo a pole shift between 16 and 20 degrees. And this would happen when both Mount Etna in Italy and Mount Pelée in Martinique erupt together. And when that happens, we'll have 90 days to evacuate the coastlines.
Are those volcanoes still active?
Oh, they are. Mount Etna just erupted a few months ago, and scientists at Mount Pelée said that the seismic activity there is above baseline.
No, no.
Now, if the poles do shift, as Edgar Casey predicts, the world map is going to look very different. Africa will be divided into 3 parts. The Nile will widen, and a brand new waterway will split the continent. As the Red Sea grows, Cairo will eventually disappear into the sea. Asia is already very seismic and will suffer the most dramatic changes. Land will be covered from the Philippines to Japan by the ocean. As the Pacific plate shifts, the islands of Japan will sink, leaving only a few small islands. Taiwan and most of Korea will be completely lost to the sea. The entire coast of China will be pushed inland hundreds of miles. The population of India will be told not to seek higher ground within the interior of the country due to buckling of the land. Instead, they will have to head to the Himalayas. The high mountains of Tibet and Nepal will provide refuge. Antarctica will no longer be covered in ice. but will once again become fertile and green. Australia will lose nearly 25% of its land due to coastal flooding. The Adelaide area will become a new sea. The Simpson and Gibson deserts will become fertile farming land. New Zealand will actually grow in size and will once again connect to mainland Australia. And New Zealand will ultimately become one of the safest areas in the New World.
Lucky Kiwis.
Europe will suffer. Most of Northern Europe will simply be gone, sunk into the sea as the tectonic plate underneath it collapses. Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark disappear, eventually becoming hundreds of small islands. Most of the UK, from Scotland to the English Channel, will disappear into the ocean, but several small islands will remain. London and Birmingham will actually survive, but not as cities, as islands. Ireland will disappear completely except for land at high elevation. Russia will be separated from Europe by an entirely new sea when the Caspian, Black, Kara, and Baltic Seas combine. The new sea will stretch all the way to Siberia. Russia's climate will remain intact, leaving Russia to supply most of Europe's food.
Putin is gonna be king of the world.
You mean he isn't already?
You make a good point.
In Canada, most of the coastline will be pushed in by 200 miles. Regions in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and areas of Alberta will become the refugee survival center of Canada. As the North American plate buckles, the new islands of California will be created with almost 150 separate islands. The West Coast will recede east toward Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. The Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence will join and continue from the Mississippi River all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. All coastal areas from Maine to Florida will be taken over by water and pushed inland for miles. Most of the coastal areas of Mexico will be flooded. The California Baja coast will ultimately become a series of islands. Billions of people will be displaced by this cataclysm. Billions more will be killed.
Well, that was cheerful.
Sorry about that.
When is this pole shift supposed to happen?
Well, Casey said 1998.
Oh, we're fine.
Yeah, but NASA has detected a slight pole shift that could be a concern.
When did they detect the shift?
1998.
Yeah, damn it.
Before we begin our next story, I have a question for you. What do these things have in common? Major airlines, NATO ships, and your car. They all use a GPS, a global positioning system. This is a navigation system and it tells us where the magnetic North Pole is. But now, our system needs a major upgrade. Scientists have changed their tracker because this North Pole is not where it used to be. It is on the move and it is moving with dramatic speed. Our next report tells you why.
This is our planet Earth, and this is the top of the world. In the middle of the Arctic Ocean, this is the North Pole, the geographic North Pole, also known as the true North. Now, what also remains true is that marking the North Pole is quite challenging because the area is covered by sea ice, which is constantly moving. Yes, for theoretical purposes, its geographic location is fixed. And this is crucial for us to tell us when the world is upside down. But funnily, the true north is kind of like the Pythagoras theorem. We don't use it much in day-to-day life. What we do use is the magnetic North Pole. We use it for navigation. It's on our GPS and it's different from the true north. You may remember this from primary school. The Earth's core has molten metals. They are constantly churning like a moving ball filled with water. And when the metals churn, they create a magnetic field which protects us from the sun's radiation. This is what the magnetic field looks like, and these lines converge at the top and bottom of our planet. The topmost point is the magnetic North Pole. Now, unlike the true north or our geographic north, you can't trust the magnetic north to stay in one place. And you can blame the molten metals. They keep sloshing continuously. So the magnetic lines are never static. They're always jiggling. So the northernmost point is always on the move. This pole was first discovered in the 1800s. Back then, the pole was situated in the Canadian Arctic. Then it drifted away and moved towards Russia. This was a very slow process. But now the pole is closer to Siberia than to Canada. And this recent shift has happened at a much quicker pace. The North Pole's move has accelerated and it's shocking scientists. No one knows why this pole is dramatically speeding up, but they aren't too worried. Though what bothers them is the accuracy of tracking this move. So now scientists have released a new model. It's a new tracker for the position of the magnetic North Pole. Why? To preserve the accuracy of the GPS. So now, airlines, ships, militaries, and even your GPS system, they're all upgrading the tracking software to keep up with the moody magnetic North Pole.
Did you know that Earth has two North Poles? There's the geographic North Pole, which never changes, and there's the magnetic North Pole, which is always on the move. And right now, it's moving faster than usual. Over the last 150 years, the magnetic North Pole has casually wandered 685 miles across northern Canada. But right now, it's racing 25 miles a year to the northwest. This could be a sign that we're about to experience something humans have never witnessed before: a magnetic polar flip. And when this happens, it could affect much more than just your compass.
Right now on the surface of the planet, it looks like it's just a bar magnet, right? Our compasses are just pointing toward one pole at a time, because there's a dominant two-pole dipole system.
But sometimes, Earth doesn't always just have a single magnetic north and south pole. Evidence suggests that for hundreds to thousands of years at a time, our planet has had 4, 6, and even 8 poles at a time. This is what has happened when the magnetic poles flipped in the past. And when it happens again, it won't be good news for humans. Now you might think that 8 poles must be better than 2, but the reality is that multiple magnetic fields would fight each other. This could weaken Earth's protective magnetic field by up to 90% during a polar flip. Earth's magnetic field is what shields us from harmful space radiation, which can damage cells, cause cancer, and fry electronic circuits and electrical grids. With a weaker field in place, some scientists think this could expose planes to higher levels of radiation, making flights less safe. This could also disrupt the internal compass in many animals, which use the magnetic field for navigation. Even more extreme, it could make certain places on the planet too dangerous to live. But what exactly will take place on the surface is less clear than what will undoubtedly happen in space. Satellites and crewed space missions will need extra shielding that we'll have to provide ourselves. Without it, intense cosmic and solar radiation will fry circuit boards and increase the risk of cancer in astronauts. Our modern way of life could cease to exist. We know this because we're already seeing a glimpse of this in an area called the South Atlantic Anomaly. Turns out, the direction of a portion of the magnetic field deep beneath this area has already flipped. And scientists say that's one reason why the field has been steadily weakening since 1840. As a result, the Hubble Space Telescope and other satellites often shut down their sensitive electronics as they pass over the area. And astronauts on the International Space Station report seeing a higher number of bright flashes of light in their vision, thought to be caused by high-energy cosmic rays that the weaker field can't hold back. Since experts started measuring the anomaly a few decades ago, it has grown in size and now covers a fifth of Earth's surface, with no signs of shrinking anytime soon. This is so extreme that it could be a sign we're on the brink of a polar flip, or we may already be in the midst of one. But scientists remain skeptical, mainly because
the last thing the poles reversed was 780,000 years ago. So we don't have an oral record of this.
Turns out 780,000 years is over double the time that Earth usually takes between flips.
Since the last mass extinction, there have been reversals roughly every 300,000 years.
So what gives? Well, scientists haven't figured it out yet. It's unnerving to think that our modern way of life, banking, the stock exchange, missile tracking, GPS, relies on the outcome of something we can neither predict nor control. One study went so far as to estimate that a single giant solar storm today could cost the US up to $41.5 billion a day in damages. and that's with the Earth's magnetic field at its current strength. It's frightening to even imagine the devastation a storm would bring to an Earth with a magnetic field only 10% as strong as it is now. We may not be able to stop a polar flip, but we can at least start to take measures to minimize the damage. The first step? Figure out what's going on with this wacky field. On the hunt are the European Space Agency's swarm satellites that are currently collecting the most precise data on the strength of Earth's magnetic field. Right now, they could be our greatest hope for solving this riddle.
Let me diverse just for one moment to show you how quickly this world can change. Very, very quickly. I indicated that not all world catastrophic events result in a pole shift. Well, I don't believe you're aware, maybe you are, but I don't believe most people are aware that just a few thousand years ago, at 705 BC, a major worldwide catastrophic event occurred. It actually shifted the entire planet, but it was not a pole shift. In fact, during that time, King Hezekiah reigned, and the sun moved backward in the sky. It did not set. It simply, the planet stopped revolving in its current direction, and it moved backward about 10 hours worth, of almost half of a revolution. And then whatever gravitational wave or passing space body affected it, it released it. And then it continued to move forward in the same direction. At that very same time, 705 BC, according to our current calendar, the ancient Chinese, who were great astronomers, they recorded that the sun set twice in the same day. It set, it rose back up from the west, and it set again. Now,
that sounds like we were doing the moving.
Right. Now, during that time, before that time, we have discovered, it is very well documented over hundreds of years. There are historically 15 ancient calendars that were discovered before that time, that existed before 705 BC. 15 ancient calendars. Every one of those calendars has 360-day years. Every calendar is based on a 360-day year. After that event, every calendar for the next 5 years, all around the planet, all the civilizations changed their calendars. The Assyrians, the Chaldeans, the Egyptians, the Hebrews, the Persians, the Greeks, the Chinese, the Mayans, the Hindus. There's every civilization that existed during that time over the next 5 years readjusted their calendars to 365-day years.
Something happened. How did they know this?
They knew it because the stars didn't line up. In fact, they took various approaches. It was very interesting. Numus Pompilius, the second king of Rome, recognized the original calendar, but he added 5 days per year to it to adjust. King Hezekiah, Numus' contemporary at that same time, reorganized the Jewish calendar in a very bizarre way. He added a month each Jewish leap year on a cycle of every 7 and 19 years to make up the adjustment. Other civilizations made different adjustments as they saw the rotational speed of the Earth change as it moved around the sun. So over the period of the next 5 years, all the civilizations caught up to 365-day years. And today, we have 365-day years, but we didn't have that in the immediate past. Before 705 BC, they were 360 days.
That is amazing.
So it just shows you that not all global catastrophic events, it also shows you how frail we are. That we don't know what caused that, but we assume it was a passing space body because we are no longer near the galactic plane like we're approaching now. So if something that small, a passing space body, could cause that, obviously with enough gravitational pull to affect the planet, as our entire solar system passes through this gravitational plane, we expect massive upheaval, as we're starting to see with the earthquakes. And then as we pass through it, we expect to be bombarded by series of small asteroids followed by larger asteroids as we continue to pass through it. The asteroids, of course, are the dust and the settling matter along the dark rift. And this is where I come back to your question about wormwood. Mm-hmm. The prophecies that you're talking about, the one that specifically mentions wormwood, It mentions that after it talks about a series of events, starting with a pole shift of no less. The exact wording would be similar to the sky recedes as a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island is moved off of its foundation. Well, if you look at the planet and use terminology that you don't have scientific terminology back then, but if you use whatever terminology you have and you say that every mountain on the planet and every island on the planet is moved off of its foundation, that certainly sounds like a pole shift to me.
Absolutely.
What we expect in our model is exactly what the prophecies then indicate. Now that your atmosphere is stripped, I mean, it just said it rolled away like a scroll. You are at risk to incredible solar radiation or CME blasts. And what is the next prophecy in this series of things? You have literally, if I can, let me find what I would like to do is I would like to find a phrase that describes that particular event. Here it is. Let me read to you a phrase from one of the prophecies that you're referring to, and explain it. And hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and a third of the trees were burnt up.
Good my.
Okay, now remember, they don't have scientific terms. If you rip apart the atmosphere of Earth with a pole shift, you are now exposing the upper atmosphere. If a CME blast from the sun, coronal mass ejection, now makes it to the Earth because its magnetosphere has been altered. In other words, our quote, what is protecting the Earth is now down. We are easily susceptible to the solar winds. In other words, the CME from the sun. That is the fire. Also, as it approaches the upper atmosphere, the 270 degrees minus Celsius temperature of the outside frigid space now touches the upper atmosphere, which is basically water vapor. It would suddenly turn to ice crystals instantly. There's your ice. The hail, which is ice, and fire, the CME, are mixed together and mingled with blood. You're looking at a sequence. It is now moving toward the Earth. What is instantly vaporized? These 43,000 airplanes that are flying at any given moment, and all the people aboard, plus all the flying birds and animals in the air.
Gone.
So in other words, there's your mingled with blood, and then it continues. What does it do? It continues to make it to the deck, and they are thrown to the earth, and a third of the trees are burnt up. In other words, this is a great sequence of events to describe a simple CME blast that literally fries a third of the planet.
But the fact they were able to predict this is scary.
Now, the next sequence of events is what we would also expect. You have small asteroids hitting the land, hitting the sea, followed by a very large asteroid, what is referred to as wormwood. Now, this is the really interesting part about wormwood. You wanted me to give you my take on it. It seems to be a significant. Now, how do they actually? What divine information presents? What divine information they acquire in order to give you an exact sequence in such extreme detail that science can't even begin to touch. I mean, I'll have to leave that to you for right now. But they discuss wormwood not because it's significant so much, but because of what it does next. A very large, what is like a star or an asteroid, falls to the Earth, and the very next thing that happens is a third of the day and a third of the night don't shine. A third of the moon, a third of the stars, a third, etc. But this is not an obscuration.
Right. It's not like dust in the air.
No, because dust in the air is described next, and it uses different words. This is actually a speeding up of the planet. The asteroid wormwood actually hits the planet at an angle, so our Earth speed no longer is 365 days. And we now know that it is very simple to alter the spin of the Earth because it happened 705 BC. So basically we have a whole sequence of events. How they could know anything about this is beyond human ken. I'm just telling you that just right up front. So prophecy is absolutely amazing, but what is more amazing to us is we created a scientific model, a very precise scientific model. And we see that these prophecies model very precisely what we feel this model would present.